Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are on this wonderful planet of ours. Welcome to I'm Alive, this special I'm Alive to acknowledge those who have just had a special day celebrating in North America, whether it was Canada Day or the 4th of July. Hope you guys had a great holiday. And I thought that I would get up at the crazy hour of it's just after 3 a.m. on Thursday morning here in Melbourne, Australia, in order to find a time that will be more convenient for you folks over there. So hopefully that will work, and we'll see a few people that will head in this direction. If you haven't been here before, welcome. Please do share this with your friends. It'll be great to have more people join us, and even if they can't join us live, which many people can't, the recording goes up afterwards and people will be able to look at it afterwards. So even if you send the message now, they're not able to come and join us right now, they'll still know about it. So please let your friends know. Please like the video afterwards. Please comment. And if you're joining us live, please comment as you go along. And if you're not joining us live, comment as if you are. I'd just appreciate if you would just put hashtag WePlay beforehand, and that will let me know, and I'll be able to, when I look for the comments afterwards, see what people have been saying afterwards. I'm Stephen Baroda, rabbi, educator, and I'm a certified professional. I help you to connect better with others by communicating on their wavelength instead of yours. And our topic this morning is going to very much hone in on a problem that can happen when you're not communicating on the same wavelength as something else. Our topic in particular is getting on with a difficult boss. And by the way, I'm using StreamYard in order to be able to go out live on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn at the same time. And it'd be helpful, by the way, if you could let me know if you're on those platforms, whether or not you are there or not. I'm just going to a quick look myself. I see that we're definitely okay on Facebook and on LinkedIn. I think we are as well. Can't quite find it myself right now. Oh, yes. No, I don't know. Not sure. Hard to 100% tell over here whether or not we are on or not. I hope that we are. Okay, I really don't spend any more time looking right now, so let's hope that the technology is doing its thing. On Facebook, for sure, I see that it's happening. So if you're having any difficulty on the other platforms, then just switch over to Facebook, where I see that we are there. Of course, if you're not on the other platforms, you won't be able to hear me say that. Anyway, it would be good to find out, is this something that you've had a problem with in the past? Communicating and connecting with your boss. Now, when I say boss, it doesn't matter whether that person has a power of hire and fire, or whether they're your manager, your team leader. That's not really the relevant part here. The relevant part is that person's the person that you report to. You want to have a cooperative relationship with them. You want to be able to work together with them. You want that collegiality, and it really isn't happening. But in fact, your relationship is so soured that it's actually causing you angst of different sorts. If you go over to the video blog that I put together a couple of days ago, you see that the link under my name there will just replace the last word just with the number 2, stephenbaroda.com/2, and you will see the full text there. And I quote from ACAS, the Arbitration and Conciliation Service from the United Kingdom, that talked about the fact that in an average year, you have something like 9.6 or 9.7 million people, so like that, who report a problem at work, and 60% of those actually say that they are being caused stress or anxiety or depression as a result of that conflict at work. So this is no small thing. It affects a lot of people. And I have a feeling that a lot of us have experienced it. I mentioned in the invite post that I used to live in the United States in a couple of places actually, but in particular Dayton, Ohio, where my daughter Eva was born 21 years ago. And I was working there for a congregation. And there was a certain fellow there. He was the executive director of the congregation. In many ways, he was the guy who really ran the place. Even though I was there as a sort of assistant rabbi type position, it was actually called ritual and program director, and there was a rabbi there. But it was quite a large congregation, and this fellow was the guy who sort of organized everything else. He doubled as a chef as well. So when we had the little meals after services that we always did on a Saturday morning and other events, he was the guy who always organized it. He really was the go-to man at the place, and he was the guy who would coordinate our meetings at the beginning of the week and so forth. And I didn't get on with this fellow. I found him just very, very difficult to get on with. I felt like that whenever I would come up with an idea, he always looked at it with suspicion. There was all that sort of kind of sarcasm in his voice, and if you wanted him to show any flexibility, forget it. It got to the stage where, I would go home. Sometimes I lived up the road, so occasionally I would be able to go home at lunchtime or in the evening after work, and I would always be screaming at the walls, like, what is it with this man? What is it with this man that he seems to be such a difficult character? And it really did begin to really undermine my self-esteem, and I started to ask myself, how much longer can I really stay in this position if he and I are both going to be working for the same organization? So I really did get like that. We didn't have too many sort of clashes face to face, but it was obvious, I'm sure, to him as well, that the tension was there. And interestingly enough as well, you could tell that he and the rabbi too had issues with each other that were quite similar. And I could never really understand it, other than that, well, there must be something wrong with this fellow. Well, I only wish I would have known iMA back in those days, because if I would have done, I would have realized he wasn't the devil incarnate, to use an expression from another religion other than my own. But this fellow was a high green, but we call it iMA a high green. Now, I can't go into the details of how the whole thing works on this live. And that's where that link comes in under my name there. If you go to stephenbaroda.com/free download, you'll be able to have access to my 25-minute or so PDF, and there's a link there to a video where I do go into this in some detail about the two factors that iMA takes into account when we look into what is the comfort zone of a person, what makes a person tick, where the areas of brilliance lie, and it ends up that you end up with 4 quadrants with 4 different colors. We call them high green, high yellow, high red, and high blue. So this fellow, I'll use his name. His name is Barry. Is Barry, as far as I know if he's still alive and well, was a high green. Now, a high green is a very focused individual, like he was generally, softly spoken, not naturally assertive, but certainly someone who will tell you, once you get to know them, how they feel, but somebody who was very detail-oriented, somebody who was very precise, somebody who knew how to run things, someone who knew how to get things done. But he needed order, he needed detail, he didn't like things to change. I'll give an example. One time, we were looking to do an event out of town. And so I needed to actually go check out the place. And when I spoke to the people, they said, look, the best day for you to come down is on a Tuesday. And Tuesday was my day off. So I went into his office and I told him that. And I said, look, would it be okay if I go down there next Tuesday and I'll take Wednesday off instead and do that? And I was just expecting him to say, yeah, of course. Well, no, of course, sounds great. Instead, he was like, no, Tuesday is your day off. Wednesday, you're here. You can go on Tuesday if you want, but you're not going to take off that other day in lieu. It's like, what's this? Again. So this just did not go down well with me. But now, and I realize this, because for him, Wednesday was a day where he had in mind who was going to be around. I was one of the people who was going to be around. He would come in on Wednesday morning and realize I wasn't there. It would throw him off because he's a guy who accuracy is important, detail is important, consistency is important, doesn't like change. And he works in that kind of way and is effective in that kind of way, very, very reliable. And you could set your clock by him. And that's what people liked about him. And even though, as I say, he was not a naturally assertive person with the people, he learned how to be able to, to be sociable. He wasn't the guy that you could have a long conversation with, but he was a guy who was always nice to talk to. And for the people got on with him very well. But for those of us who were working with him, it was very difficult. But that's because that's who he was. On the other hand, Stephen Baroda and the rabbi, we are what iMA knows as, refers to as a high yellow. We are ideas people. We are assertive people. We are people who, who like to lead, but to do so in a way of like entertaining or teaching or influencing people. We like to have a bit of fun. We like not to take procedural matters overly seriously. Likely, if we've got a meeting at 9 o'clock, we'll get there at 8:59, whereas he would be there at 8:45, sitting at his desk and all prepared. And we would be the ideas people. And for him, it was like, yeah, okay, another one of these ideas. Oh, this Stephen fellow, seems like he's similar to the rabbi as well. Maybe it's these religious guys. I don't know what it is, but they come up with these ideas and do they really know how to follow through on them? I better be on top and make sure that the detail is correct. We know exactly how many people are coming in, exactly what time it's starting, to make sure that everything is in detail. And if they get overexcited, try to tell them, all right, calm down. But for us, it felt like, for me anyway, I can speak for, like the balloon being pricked. And so we were different from each other, very, very different from each other. But what happens in those situations is that you've got to find a way through. You've got to find a way through. Now it happens, and again, when you go to my 3 downloads, you'll see a chart there of these 4 colors in a quadrant, and you'll see that the high yellow and the high green are opposite each other on the diagonal. Now, people who are opposite each other on the diagonal have the most issues getting on with each other. Think of it like this. We have approximately 2 billion people on this planet. 8 billion people on this planet. And so therefore there are 2 billion in each quadrant. So you get on very, very well and have a lot in common with 2 billion people, which is amazing. But equally, there are 6 billion where you don't get on with them so well. And there's those 2 billion, the ones who are on the diagonal, so which was the case with Barry and me, where you really don't have too much in common at all. And that's where you have what I call a color clash. And that's where you can have a lot of angst. And that's where you can begin to tear your hair out and wonder, where is this fellow coming from? Which is exactly where I was about, believe it or not, 23 years ago. Incredible that it's really that long ago. So how do we fix it? So basically, there are 4 steps. And if you go to that video blog that I did at stephenbaroda.com/2, or you'll see the video also on my YouTube channel. That was hard to get out of my mouth. I go through what the 4 steps are, and I'm very briefly going to talk about them here now. The first one is that you have to recognize which one of these 4 quadrants you are in, which high color you are. I'm using the term high color. I won't go into why specifically we use that term right now. So you have to find yours. So in my case, the high yellow. How do you do that? Well, in that free download, there is a link to the questionnaire, or I can actually give you the link right now. Just replace that word free download with the word questionnaire. stephenbroder.com/questionnaire, and you can actually fill in the iMA questionnaire, and very quickly you will find out what color you are. Are you a high yellow like me, a high green like Barry, or one of the other two colors, high red or high blue? So first of all, you've got to discover your color, and that's quite easy to do through the survey. Then you've got to discover the other person's color. Now that, theoretically, you could say, hey, Barry, I know we got some issues here. Do me a favor. Just go to this link and fill out this thing and find out, let me know what the result is. He could do that. Chances are, you just imagine with him, he would have looked at me if I was totally off my rocker. But you're not going to be able to do that. So therefore, what you have to do is to figure it out. And the good news is that people give clues as to their color by the way that they behave. If I would have known iMA back then, I would have been able to figure out Barry's color relatively quickly. Now, to give you some idea of how this can be done, if you see somebody work in writing, like through emails and so forth, and that communication tends to be easier because people's styles are going to come out particularly in writing, but also when you're with them, it will come out. So I actually done a couple of pieces on my website where, given my background as well, I thought it'd be quite fun. I actually have taken some of the biblical characters and through the main instance that we know about them, figured out their high color. So for example, you can go to stephenbroder.com/Abraham/Sarah/Isaac. And there's a few up there. I hope to write a few more in the next few weeks as well. And that will give you a bit of an idea of the type of things we look for so that you can say, okay, yeah, now I see that indicates that this person is a high red or a high blue. And so therefore, maybe this boss that I'm having so much difficulty is, yeah, okay, maybe he is such and such a color. And as I say, once you have your color and the other person's color, almost certainly you're going to find that they're not the same and that there is a clash. Now, if you have a clash on the vertical or the horizontal, then that means that you have one of the two things in common. And therefore, it's not going to be a total clash. If you're on the diagonal, as was the case with Barry and me, then you essentially have next to nothing in common. And that makes it just that much harder. So what do? So the letters iMA and iMA actually help us to understand. So the I, which is a little I just for copyright reasons, stands for identify. So there's the two halves of the identify, which I've just mentioned. Identify your high color, which of these comfort zones, these quadrants you fall into, and then you do the same thing for the other person. Then we move on to the M of iMA. Now, the M of iMA stands for modify. So what you essentially have to do is modify the way you behave, and particularly how you write and how you come across in business settings. And by the way, it also works in other settings as well, but that's for another day. So that you are, as I use that phrase when I in my tagline when I introduce myself, that we need to be able to speak on the other person's wavelength rather than our own. So what does that mean? So in my example, okay, so I'm very enthusiastic. I go in there, I've got all these ideas, and I'm like, one idea comes, as I'm saying about a high yellow. It's not so important if you don't go with his particular idea, because he'll come up with another one before you know it. But to connect with high yellow, you do need to come up with their ideas. Well, if he knew that, he would have been a bit more being able to acknowledge that, you know what, good idea. Let me think about that a little bit more, as opposed to just sort of like washing it off. But from my point of view, I would think about, okay, let's take one idea at a time. He needs detail. So let's give him an email saying, hey, I've come up with this idea. This is why I think it will work. This is why I want to do it. These are some of the potential problems. And here's the detail of how we're going to work. What date, what venue, what time, how we're going to invite people, etc., and go to a tremendous amount of detail, because high greens like a tremendous amount of detail. I don't want to give away too much here, but I mean, if you're dealing with a high red, and most people do find that their boss is a high red, so high red is the goal-driven person. They tend to more often than not be the people in those C-suite positions. They like the opposite. They want bullet points. They also don't want to just hear about ideas, but they want to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, see ya, and out of there. So if you're dealing with someone like that, then you got to do it that way. And okay, so I might as well mention, as we mentioned, 3 out of 4, the high blue is your relationship, your people person. They love to do brainstorming, and they take their time, and for them it's the relationship that is key rather than the things going on. So there you got to go a lot slower and say, okay, I've got this idea. Maybe you and I can sit down, have it over a cup of coffee. Let's brainstorm a little bit. Maybe we can have a few people who can discuss how this might work and how it might feel to do this project. And you've got to focus that way. So depending who you're dealing with, you just have to speak on their wavelength. And the incredible thing is, magic happens when you do that. I heard a story, a very similar story to the one that I told that happened to me, of a very similar situation where there was a person who felt like the other person was just like a wet blanket, pouring negativity onto every idea, and happened to be that they went through this process and discovered that they were opposites in the same way, actually, high green and high yellow. And once they did that, they actually became really good friends and were actually able to work very, very cooperatively together once they understood what has to happen. Now, generally, the other person's not going to be at the loop to begin with, unless they become very impressed and say, you know what, I do notice that we're getting on a lot better. What happened? And then you might be able to tell them, and then they're going to be able to work on themselves as well. That would be fantastic. But if it's a one direction, then it's on you. So you have to modify the way you speak to that person in order that you are actually coming across in a way that they can understand it better, and they notice it. And suddenly the relationship warms up. They feel better about you. You feel better about them, and everything works a lot better. Now, the A in iMA stands for adapt. Essentially telling us that we have to do that with every different type of person. We have to adapt the way that we communicate and the way that we act and the way we behave so that the other person feels comfortable. So I've already given some hints there. Depending who they are, you might have to go into a lot of detail. You might need to give bullet points. You might need to be a bit more fuzzy and prepared to sit down and have a coffee and do it a lot more slowly. Or be excited about the ideas if you're dealing with a high yellow. And you have to be able to do that with every person. Now, A can also stand for accept. That you accept that not that this person is difficult, as we generally think, but they're just different, and that they have different skills. And I look back at this particular fellow, oh my gosh, I mean, the skills that he had, as I said a bit earlier, and even more in hindsight, I don't think the place would have been able to stand up if he actually hadn't been there. But that's not how I focused on things at the time. But when you do that, you accept who that person is, that's great. And if you can actually appreciate their strengths and that they're different from yours, then that's the A in iMA can also stand for appreciate, and that would be an even higher level. So they are the 4 steps: identify your high color, identify the high color of the other person, modify your behavior, and then learn to be adaptable and accepting of other people. And then magic really happens. Then you have a team of people. I listened to something the other day where there was literally a company of 4 people, and they all happened to be a different color each. And they learned to cooperate with each other. They found a way, and became very, very successful as a result. Let me tell one more story just to give a bit of an illustration. And this is what they call an apocryphal story. In other words, it almost certainly didn't happen, but certainly could have happened, and it illustrates the point. The story is actually in 2 parts. The first one happened in the offices of Microsoft when they were coming up with a tablet. And they had a whole team of people, mostly high greens are the ones who are your geeks, right? Who were designing this. And their boss, Bill Gates, also is a high green. So he sent out an email saying, we're going to have a meeting at such a time where we are. I want to see progress. I want to find out what the progress is on our tablet project. So being high greens, they would send out a really detailed, long 10-page Word document attached to an email. Bill, please see attached. And they look at the document, and it goes on and on and on and on and on with all the details of everything that they've done. And being the high green that he is, he probably would have sat there and read every word and been very impressed. So then he starts the meeting and he says, okay, so how are we doing on progress? Well, Bill, we sent you the email. Yeah, I was very interested. Oh, this, it's great. I need to have an idea. When are we going to launch this? I don't know, Bill. It could be another few months. We've still got to do this. We've still got to do that. And so he sent them away, and he said, all right, fine, we'll have another meeting another month, and we'll see how we go. And it went on that for a few months. Up at Apple, they had a similar meeting. Same thing, this time with the late Steve Jobs. Now, Steve Jobs was a high red. He was one of these guys who had a goal, 1, 2, 3, 4, no messing about, got to get out there, I can move mountains. So the meeting starts off exactly the same way. And he said, yeah, I know you sent me this email. I had a quick look. It was about 15 pages. I briefly scanned it, but I really didn't have the patience for it. What I want to know is, when can we get this thing going? And they gave a similar type of answer. I don't know, maybe a couple more months. Why a couple more months? Well, we want to do this feature, which he turned around and said, fine. Those features, they'll be in the iPad 2. I want the iPad 1 out on the market. Let's go. And that's the difference between how a high red and a high green manages things. And I think we all know the history of who did better in the tablet, right? iPad rules. But think about it from the point of view of the head of IT. When he was dealing with the guy at Microsoft, was like, yes, Bill Gates gets me. He understands. He lets me work at my pace. This is going to be great, but we're going to do it my way. We're going to make sure every single detail is fantastic. So when that person boots up that new Microsoft product, it's going to be just tops. And you'll feel great. On the other hand, the guy at Apple, he said, you know what? Maybe I should go apply for a job somewhere else. I mean, I just can't stand Steve Jobs. I mean, look what it is. We spent ages on this. I just spent best part of a day sitting there drafting this whole thing, and he says, yeah, I couldn't really be bothered to do it. All I want to do is get on. And then he's going to leave certain parts on the side for the next version. This first version, I mean, we want to get the first version right. Am I in the right place? So you can see there how those heads are going to bump with each other. And so they need to learn to do it in such a way that they can work properly with each other. So what does that mean? Well, it would probably would have been better if the late Steve Jobs had a little bit more patience to actually read through some of the detail. Obviously, it's in my story. We don't know if he didn't. And the high green would have to say, okay, next time I'm going to say, okay, here where we're up to, and I'm going to give him an email that he can read in about 3 minutes. And say, if you're interested in more detail, reply to me and I can always tell you more, as opposed to attaching something with 20 pages. And that way, those two gentlemen would have been able to get on much better with each other. Well, that'll do it for now. I really would like to hear what you think. Please comment, put hashtag replay, and then if you're watching this afterwards, let me know what you think. Share it, like it, and do join us again when we do this next week. Thank you so much for joining me on iMA Live.